All right. As you know, we were retained by Mr. Sullivan in June when he was charged in this case, and we had a press conference here to announce that. And at that press conference, we announced to you that we weren't satisfied with the investigation, and we were going to do our own investigation and do it very thoroughly and not just jump to any conclusions. And we did that, and it took quite some time, and we presented everything we got to the state attorney's office in Brevard County, and we wanted to be sure and satisfied in our own mind, not that we had any doubts about Mr. Sullivan's innocence, but we arranged to give him a polygraph by a well-known polygraphist who most of his work is done for law enforcement and prosecution. And we were on the main issues that we was polygraphed on was the consent issues. Not on what happened, but on whether or not at any time whatsoever did he do anything without consent or against the will of his accuser. And he passed with flying colors every answer asked about consent. So we were satisfied that anything that happened in that office was done with the consent of both parties. So then we set out on our investigation, and I want to give Mr. Riley Welchance, investigator, a lot of credit for what he did. He just took this case and went with it and followed every single lead that came up, and every lead that we had, we gave to him, and he followed through on it. Some were fruitful, some weren't. But we did not fail to look into anything that we could find that would lead to any knowledge about this case possible. And one thing that we were confident about, that we also met with the assistant state attorney in Brevard County, who I found to be extremely competent. I mean, I haven't been a state attorney. I've received cases from other circuits before, and sometimes you have a tendency to maybe just assign it to anybody in your office just to get rid of it. But they assigned it to their best person, I believe, and she was very conscientious about what she did. She'd make any guarantees, never told us anything we gave her, whether it was good or bad. She just received any information we gave her, and I'm confident that some of that was helpful in her making her decision. We never really felt at any time that the decision would be to prosecute him, but you know, that happens sometimes. Even though you may feel that somebody, you know in your own mind, own heart, that somebody's guilty, sometimes some officers prosecute me anyway. But we're very happy to be here today and to announce that, I'm sure all of you know, that the state today filed a no information, which means that they are not pursuing the charges any further, that they do not believe that they have even enough information to file formal charges and let the process take its course. There are a lot of things that happened during this investigation, and I want to say one thing. My son Robert, Jr., he did a lot of work and worked hard, but this guy sitting next to me, and not another one like him. I got to know him during this case, and he's a hard worker. He's extremely knowledgeable, and he's a great teammate. And if I ever got arrested for anything, his door would be the first one I'd knock on. And he's got a few comments he'd like to make, and some of the work he did and some of the observations that he made during the course of the investigation. Andy?
Move the mic over.
Yeah.
Oops, I'm still hooked to my phone.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Bob. I've known Bob for my entire legal career, and he's a mentor to a lot of us here, so don't let him ever sell himself short. And Robbie too, he's taken right after his father, and they're both great lawyers. The first thing I want to point out is before it is said, I want it to be known that at no time did Mr. Sullivan offer any financial settlement in this case. No money has exchanged hands. He's not paid his accuser a nickel, and he will never pay her a nickel. So this was not a case decided with any ulterior motives or anything like that. This was a case decided on its merits. I echo Bob, our investigator Riley Welchamp did a extremely good job in assisting us in the case. It should also be known, and I'm going to go over some of the particulars that I think are important to the case. We started off this case by saying that there was not a thorough investigation, and we were going to afford Mr. Sullivan the investigation that the Vero Beach Police Department did not. I've already read some of the comments made by our chief of police, and I can tell you I think they're very disappointing. We were very lucky that this case was assigned to an independent prosecutor with no ties to this jurisdiction. Not that Mr. Colton would have been biased, we don't believe that for a second. But we are relieved that someone who has no ties to Vero Beach Police Department investigated this case and did afford Mr. Sullivan a competent, thorough investigation, one which was not done at the beginning. We just believe had that been done, it would have saved this man a lot of trouble and a lot of heartache. There were things that were very troubling that we uncovered in this investigation. One being that there had been contact with the accuser and a member of the Vero Beach Police Department for at least a month prior to these accusations being made. There were a number of phone calls made between the accuser and this member of the Vero Beach Police Department. This member of the department did not come forward to his own agency. This is something we uncovered, and we were able to present to the prosecutor. And I would feel confident that this must have weighed heavily on her decision, although I can't speak for her. But this is something we uncovered, and it was very troubling in the case. I think this was a surprise to that agency, and I'm kind of flabbergasted that they are still maintaining that a thorough investigation was done, because it just wasn't. Mr. Sullivan has maintained his innocence from day one. He's never wavered. We had no reason to doubt him, and when he passed the polygraph examination in this case, it was just all that much more comfortable representing him. I said at the very beginning of this case that once we do an investigation that's thorough, that things will turn out the way they should, and that they indeed have turned out the way they should. So I want to congratulate Mr. Stone and especially Mr. Sullivan, because he's been through a lot, and he looks forward to moving forward and putting this behind him.
So do you guys ultimately think, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
That this was some sort of, not vendetta, I don't know if that's the word, but just some sort of bias between the Vero Beach Police Department and Mr. Sullivan?
I personally don't think that played a role so much as, you could measure, in my opinion, you could measure the time that they spent on the investigation in minutes rather than days, hours, or days. We spent 2 months looking into this. The state attorney spent 2 months looking into this. Their investigation lasted 5 days, and of those 5 days, 2 of them were over a weekend. So and equally as disturbing is the release of information, which in the days coming, I'm sure public records requests will be made and things will happen, but I said that this was a case where they cherry-picked what they put in that arrest affidavit, and we had the opportunity to listen to the tapes in this case in completion, and I stand by that. They really put in the information they thought was damning and left out all of the vital information.
I wouldn't say a vendetta is not, I guess, the correct word. The correct word is that they did jump the gun. They didn't do a thorough investigation. Now, whether or not because of who it was caused them to do that, I don't know. They might have been eager to get somebody with a name. But this is not the first time that there's been a jump to judgment and not a very thorough investigation. And as Mr. Metcalf said earlier, it probably won't be the last time. A local newspaper article not too long ago made some comments about the manner of investigation of the Vero Beach Police Department. It's not to say it's a bad department. There are a lot of good officers over there, and we deal with them. I know quite a few of them. But if investigation can get the results that it did in this case when it's done thoroughly, then it should be done at the beginning and not at the end. People shouldn't be put through this. People shouldn't have to have their name associated with a charge like this unless you have completely and thoroughly exhausted all avenues of investigation. You know, this case is over to the extent of criminal charges, but Mr. Sullivan's going to live with those charges the rest of his life. I mean, he's 82 years old, and it's not going to be as comfortable retirement as it would have been, because nobody, you all know this better than anybody. You know, and the chief made some kind of a reference to it in his statement, that just because they're not prosecuted, that don't mean they're innocent. So that when it is that a person really is innocent, there's still those people out there who don't believe that he's innocent, but that they weren't prosecuted for some reason. They'll still believe those who don't believe that it was done for somebody paid somebody off. You know that, how that goes. But in this case, this man went through something he should never have to go through at all. It affected him every day of his life. It affected his relationship with his family, and there was no need for that to have been done if a thorough investigation had occurred in the beginning.
And I don't mean to say that I believe something sinister happened, but I don't think that happened at all. But you know, it's been said by the chief that we treated Mr. Sullivan like we did anyone else, and you know, I don't think it left his mind that this is someone special that we have to do anything special for. It's just that it wasn't thorough, and you know, when you're wrong, you're wrong, and you know, when you're wrong, you should admit you're wrong. And I think that at the very least, it can be said that they didn't spend enough time looking into this case, and that is best documented by the fact that we're here today after 2 months of investigation, and this is the result in the case.
Some might say this moved along really quickly, like abnormally fast. Can you talk about how this moved along so quickly? What kind of, you know,
How it moved along quickly?
Yeah.
I don't know how it moved along quickly, because generally when someone's arrested, the formal charges are filed within 5 to 10 days. In fact, you only have 21 days under the rules to file those charges without having a preliminary hearing, or if the person's in jail, release them without immediately without some kind of bond necessary. It moved rather slow because I think the state of Brevard County did a very thorough investigation, and I don't know why they took the time they did. I have no idea, but having been on the other side of this process, it's very seldom that you have a case that lasts 2.5 months before you file formal charges. That means somebody's looking into it and wants to be sure before they file the charges.
And we certainly didn't offer any objection to a delay in making that decision. In fact, we were very thankful that the prosecutor in this case did take her time, and so of course we didn't have a problem with that. So to echo Mr. Stone, it actually was a lengthy decision process. Normally that decision is made very quickly.
I know I came late, I apologize.
That's all right.
Can you talk, I'm not sure if you guys already addressed this, but there was this wiretap as part of this investigation.
Well,
what are your thoughts about that, and what was...
It wasn't really a wiretap as much as it was wiring somebody to go in and talk to someone. A wiretap's what you put on your phone, and it was what we call wiring somebody up, really, I guess. But apparently what happened was that once they got this allegation that came from the accuser, that they wanted to see if they could get him to confess to something. So they wired her. I'm sure they instructed her what to say and what to ask. And she went in and talked to him, and we've listened to one tape, and actually I think we have both tapes, but the first tape wasn't satisfactory to him to get any information that could help him. So they put the wire on her again, and this time they told her what they wanted to ask him, what information they wanted to get. And if you listen to the tape, you'll see that she asked the same question 8 times, and she never got the answer she wanted. She kept asking, well, the question, for example, was, why was I the target? And he said, target? What do you mean you're the target? And they wanted, I guess, him to say you were the target because you looked good or something like that. And he never would say it. And even near the end, I think I counted, I think it was the 8th time, she asked again, why was I the target? And he kept saying, I don't know anything about being a target. So everybody said that that second tape, I've heard it all over. Well, when you listen to the second tape, you'll maybe have a different opinion about this case. Well, Mr. Metcalf and I listened to it, and we were listening to it. I looked over at him, and he looked at me and smiled. And when it was over, it was, where is this the tape that one that incriminates him? So you'll get a chance to listen to it.
And so you basically think that wiretap ended up working out kind of in his favor?
I think it did, for one thing, because during the wiretap, she put her character in issue. So, you know, if you try a case like this, you can't go into a person's past acts or past activity unless they open it up. But she made a statement on that tape, which put her character in issue, allowed us to go out and look into everything in the past. And I think that was one of the things that may have led to, again, you'd have to ask Ms. Lynch and Vieira, but I think that's one of the things that also led to her making this decision, because we went out and looked into her character.
So what's next for Mr. Sullivan?
Try to put this behind him and go on with his life. He's given up his law practice. He's referred most of his cases out. And I don't know whether he'll go back to being as active in his practice or not, or what he'll do, but he just wants to spend now time with his family and just try to put this behind him. He's gone through, as I said before, he's been my friend for 50 years. He's my next door neighbor, and I know what he's gone through. And I hope that he can put it behind him enough to be able to enjoy life now.
Do you know anything about this victim, this woman? Is she still working for that firm?
Well, first place, she's not a victim.
Right, this so-called.
She's an accuser. And she's not still working for that firm. I don't know where she's working.
But yeah, you came late, and
Yes.
I'll reiterate to you that before it gets said that there was, or even suppose that money was paid in this case, I want to be clear that no money was ever paid to this accuser, and no money will ever be paid to this accuser. And this was a case that was decided on its merits, and the case just didn't have the merits to proceed, obviously. So, I can obviously confirm she hasn't worked with the firm. I can confirm as well she actually filed for an unemployment claim, and it was denied. So across the board, this just hasn't been a case that had merit.
Right.
And I'm glad to say, and I consider Charlie a friend too, and I'm glad to say he's been exonerated. No matter how the police want to characterize it, that's the end result of this case.
So I guess just in summary, what do you think happened here? Do you think this woman was just making up stuff? Do you think something was blown out of proportion? I mean, what's your summary from all of this?
Well, my summary is a lot of things that happened. That I don't think the facts really of what happened is a major issue here. The major issue is to whether or not what happened was consensual. And you weren't here when we told that when Mr. Metcalf and I got the case, Andy immediately said, why don't we polygraph him for our own benefit? So we got probably the most independent polygrapher that you could find. This guy works for law enforcement more than he works for a private, I don't know that he does any work for private attorneys. I looked at his resume, and he works mainly for criminal investigative agencies and private corporations that do employment polygraphs. And we told him the only issues we were interested in was the issue of consent. And we gave him what our view of the facts were, and he polygraphed him on the issue of whether or not he did anything against the will of the accuser, whether or not anything that happened he believed that he had consent to do so. And in his mind, was he doing, I can't think of what the third one was. But anyway, it had something to do with consent. All three issues of consent, he passed, not even questionable. Passed them as being, yes, it was done consensually. That was the issue, I believe, more than anything else. Not could they prove what facts occurred, but could they prove this girl was telling the truth about whether or not she consented to it.
Right.
And I think that a lot had to do with the fact that it happened over a period of time when no one would complain about it until maybe even a month or so after into her working there. And that's what I can't understand about the police department. That would put up a red flag for me immediately. This started happening and was continually happening for a month. Why wouldn't you say something about it? Not just keep letting it happen. And so I think that's one of the things that a competent, unbiased investigator would raise a red flag to him immediately.
So if this was taken to court, you basically would have had this great argument, in your opinion, that if something did happen, she consented to it.
Right.
Basically. So you're
Right.
not denying that maybe he did have some kind of maybe sexual behavior in the law office. You're not denying that necessarily, but you are denying that she didn't consent.
Well, I think the conduct that went on in the office, the tapes, when you hear them, it makes that conduct obvious. So, but we don't want to comment on that. But I will say this: much has been made about the fact that probable cause was initially found and a warrant was issued. But Bob's been doing this forever. I've been doing it almost 20 years, and I can tell you that probable cause is the lowest burden. That absolutely means absolutely nothing.
I mean, suspicion, probable cause suspicion.
To get a warrant is not that hard to do. It's a one-sided application that's presented to a judge, and a judge is to presume that what he's being told is the whole truth, nothing but the truth. And so probable cause is almost always found in a criminal investigation. It's very easy to do. But to meet the burden that we all enjoy, which is burden beyond a reasonable doubt, I think I read the press release from the prosecutor in this case, and basically felt that this case could never have been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and that is what's telling in the case.
That's what the prosecutor's burden is too. Their initial burden before they file a charge is not, can I present a case that might go to a jury, but do I have, if it's believable, have a case that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And if you don't have that, you should never file it. And so that's why I think that it was great in this case for us, certainly for Mr. Sullivan, that this was assigned out of the circuit, somebody that doesn't know anybody here, has no ties to any agency or person, and they got a chance to look at it unbiased, and I think they did a very, very thorough job.
Right. Which was, of course, smart, because I think, when someone just looks at the surface of this story and they see it's an attorney and they live in Indian River County, I think people would have suspected, oh, he's probably going to hire an attorney he knows and everything will be fine. So that's probably why you made that effort, right, to take it to Brevard and make sure there was no conflict of interest.
Right. Well, when you talk about hiring an attorney he knows, the man can hire whoever he wants
Right.
to. I mean, if he wanted to go out and get, what's that guy's name? Roy something?
That's whoever.
That lawyer.
Well, but look, the decision to take it out of Brevard County was not one, take Brevard County, wasn't our decision. That was
Mr.
the
Cole.
state attorney, Bruce Colton, made that decision, and Governor Scott is actually the one who appointed the 18th Circuit to prosecute the case. So we had nothing to do with that appointment, and
But that kind of helps you guys state your claim that, yeah, this was a
well, allows
honest
for
investigation,
allows for an independent like Mr. Stone said, that has no ties, that can make a very candid, do a thorough and candid investigation, and not worry about, am I going to step on anyone's toes? Is this decision going to be well received or not? She made a decision that was best for the state of Florida.
You know, I know when I was state attorney, I got a lot of assignments for hot political potatoes in other circuits. Very first case I got, they were prosecuting the deputy sheriff in Pensacola, and he happened to be a cousin to Governor Askew. So I spent a lot of time investigating that, because whatever you do, it's going to be scrutinized by everybody. So I think when you get something like that, and especially the way she approached it, she's very good prosecutor. She approached it as if, you know, I'm going into this as a prosecutor, and you know, I can tell you I'm looking for things that's going to support my investigation to prosecute, but I'm going to look into everything before I make that decision. You know, I'm not just going to get the things that can help me prosecute, but I'm going to get all the things that are against me. You know, if you don't look at the entire thing and you just jump the gun, you end up like the Vero Beach Police did this. You get egg on your face. Because you didn't look at the possible defenses, the possible problems with the case, and those things can come back to haunt you. And they did. Some people in this case came back to haunt.
And there's no way really at this point that this woman's legal team could come back. I mean, I guess she could appeal in some process.
Now, you can't appeal.
Okay.
You can't appeal a decision. It was appealed, incidentally. It was a case here involving a guy named Chris Blaine, where they filed charges against him. They sent it down to West Palm Beach. West Palm now processed it, and they appealed it. And the court said, well, I think it was dismissed, but the local court says you can't. That's a decision of the state attorney's office. That's not appealable. You can't appeal that. You know?
But she is not, from the prosecution point of view, she's not represented. The state attorney isn't, you know, I was one for a brief period of time, certainly not long as Mr. Stone was, but you're not to look at accusers or alleged victims as your client, and you're to look at the best interests of the state of Florida. I mean, you obviously have to consider what you're dealing with, and certainly consider the alleged victim's desires and wishes and what's going on. But her client is the state of Florida, and so it shouldn't be really characterized as her attorney.
Right.
You know, Ms. Lynch was not her attorney, and she acted independently and did the right thing.
Robbie, was there anything you wanted to say? You worked hard on this case too.
You know, I just echo everything everybody else has said on this. You know, there's no court of public opinion that you could go to get your reputation fully back. You know, this sure goes a long way to help out Mr. Sullivan. Unfortunately, had the Vero Beach Police Department done what they were supposed to do in the first place, none of us would be here. He wouldn't have to worry about that, but he does. And we're glad that the outcome came out the way it did, and we're happy for Mr. Sullivan.
Has there been a conversation with her from your team at all? I don't imagine that you do speak with her, but I mean, did she seem like she was just
You mean
trying to get settlement money?
The accuser?
Yeah, the accuser.
Okay. Well, Mr. Metcalf answered that.
Well, it's not something that
She
we.
wanted settlement money, did she not?
Well, but let's leave that alone right now. Some other time we might address that.
Well, you know, I will say this: time will tell. I believe what her true motives were. If she this goes away and she remains silent, goes on with her life, then that tells one story. If a civil attorney rears his head, I think that tells another story, and that'll tell you her motives. So she'll answer that question by her actions, and I guess by her lawyer's actions.
I will say one thing. I might ought to clear it with these guys before I say it. but I'm gonna go ahead and say it anyway. I'm gonna be a Donald Trump today.
Okay, we'll take a Donald Trump every day.
Something different about this case, and I'm not gonna name any names, it's gonna be for you all to figure it out. But before that decision was made by the state, there was the presence in this case of a civil attorney. That's all I'm saying.
But that decision was made today, correct?
I think last night.
Last night, I wasn't
Right.
sure what the time frame was of that decision. To not
Well,
file charges.
Right, and it was filed today. So it was when the official decision, I mean, the pleading was filed today.
Okay, perfect. I think I'm good. When they did that, this is off, and I don't mean this on camera, but just curiosity. When they did the wiretap, what was the situation like? How was our accuser and
Well,
Mr. Sullivan in the same?
They were in the office. She went by to talk to him as if she was upset about everything, you know.
Oh, okay.
So she goes in there to talk to him. And several times she'd say something, and his response would be, well, I don't remember it happening that way.
Because I was curious how she'd legally be able to be in contact with him. Yeah, I would think
Well,
that
she
would be
was,
some kind
she
of-
at that
Well,
point was acting at the direction of the law
Of law
enforcement. You're not allowed in the state of Florida to wear a recorder and unilaterally tape record someone unless it's part of an investigation.
Right.
And that's exactly what was going on.
Do you think that was strange to him? I mean, I wasn't sure if he'd be worried about her confronting him if there was all this going on.
I have no idea what he was thinking, but
Yeah.
you know, certainly he's an experienced lawyer. At one time, he was probably considered one of the top criminal defense
Yeah.
lawyers in the whole east coast of Florida.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I don't
And
know
I'll,
what's going on in his
I'll
mind.
tell you this, when you do listen to it,
Uh-huh.
one of the things Mr. Sullivan said is heard to have said, and I think this had to loom heavy on the state, is I will literally say, what is it you want me to say to you? She just would not accept that he was saying, hey, that's not how I remember it, that's not how it happened. So she kept at him. And he literally said, I will say whatever you need, what is it you need to hear from me? And then I think the next statement out of his mouth is what they took as a damaging statement. But you're literally, you know, on a half-hour conversation, you're an 82-year-old man is just being hounded over two meetings to confess to something he didn't do, and finally he says, "What do you need me to say?" And okay, whatever.
Whatever you want me to say, I will if it'll make you feel better.
Right.
You know.
Right. Just for her peace of mind kind of
Yeah,
thing.
And for me, the moment I heard that is probably the moment Mr. Stone alluded to, where I turned to him and smiled, because to me,
And I wadded up the paper and threw it in the trash.
that was the end of this case. And what I can't imagine is why that didn't end the case for the Vero Beach Police Department.
Okay.
All right.
Anything, I'm not sure if I missed anything that you guys wanted to make sure I have, but I think.
Well, only thing that we, I guess, said that you didn't get was we commended Riley Welchance behind you, who was the investigator. He really worked hard, and he did the things that should have been done prior to filing charges. He followed every single lead. He worked day and night, and I mean literally. We all have. We put more time into this than probably any case I've had in several years.
Right.
And he did a heck of a job. And, you know, sometimes investigators in cases don't get the credit they really do.
Well, and I think one of the things that we didn't, you weren't here when we mentioned it, was that there was some ongoing contact between the accuser and a member of the Vero Beach Police Department for approximately 30 days before this accusation ever came out. And we discovered that through phone records. There were over 70 calls placed between these two individuals, and this was something that the agency didn't know about. And we are the ones that uncovered that, and there really has been no reasonable explanation offered as to why during this time period where she's starting to make these accusations, that she's in constant contact with a member of the Vero Beach Police Department who didn't draft a report, never told his agency anything was going on until he was confronted by it. And the only reason he was ever confronted about it was because, you know, Bob and Robbie and I were poured through phone records and Riley, and we stumbled across it, and really thanks to Mr. Sullivan Jr. because he looked into that as well. So that had to play a big role because
There's numerous red flags, as you said.
Yeah.
too many to ignore. That's for sure.
Enough.
What
Do you
should-
prefer Bob or Roberts?
What should
Either
that-
make a
What
difference.
should that police officer done in that case?
Well, if he's later, my understanding is he later was saying, "Oh, I was told something." But if he was told something, why didn't he go forward? And I think he didn't know how to answer the question. Honestly, I think when he was confronted with, "Why is it you're having a conversation with this person who's accusing this man of doing it during that time frame?" And the very day, within an hour after it allegedly happened, she's on the phone with him, and no reports made. Why would that have been? And I'm not going to make suggestions, but I mean, you
But that's
have
a
something
good-
like that, and you let a defense lawyer
Yeah.
go wild on it.
That's a good question, but I don't think Willie wants to answer that.
Right.
I think that maybe a police officer or somebody in the department would be the best ones to answer that.
Well, I'm just trying to make sure I clearly understood it, so.
Yeah, I
bear with
understand
me,
what
I'm a
you-
little slow at times, but you're saying that this officer.
Come on.
Had a month of conversations, 70 phone calls with the accuser before he presented it to his police
He
department.
He
never
never
presented
presented
it to his police.
And to our knowledge, there's still no supplemental
Why did he
report.
finally present it to the police?
Because we found out that there were these phone calls during this time frame, and we exposed it.
But how did you find out about the phone?
We pulled the phone logs to find out who.
Yeah, but this is before he was arrested.
No, after the arrest, the first thing we did, look, we began a exhaustive social media. I mean,
She
this is-
worked there, remember, when phone calls would be important.
Right, so we decided to look into what phone calls she was making from her desk, and we were able to track it to the cell phone of the law enforcement officer. These weren't calls being made to the agency; they were directly to his personal cell phone.
Could that be looked at as her attempt? Like you said, she took a month to contact law enforcement, but does this show that she was trying to contact law
Well,
enforcement?
fortunately, we're never going to be in front of a jury to make the arguments one way or the other. But I can tell you this: it was going to be something that they were going to have to explain, and I don't think they could.
I know where you're coming from, and let me tell you the answer. Maybe this will help answer. That particular law enforcement happened to also be a friend.
Okay.
And so she wasn't calling him as a law enforcement. The calls weren't going back because of that. The reasons why, we don't know. We weren't privy to them. But it is strange when a person later makes a complaint of some wrongdoing, if they've been talking for 2 months to a representative of a police agency that eventually investigates that case, that does raise some questions. Certainly would in my mind if I was a prosecutor. I'd want to know why in the world that many calls, yet nothing was ever said because this had been alleged to have gone on for 2 months.
Yeah.
Why in the world were the calls happening, and why in the world am I finding out from the defense team that it was going on? Why am I not finding out from you or your agency?
But,
So-
but was it the police officer, the one who had all these conversations, was it he who took the information to superiors and said, we got a case here?
No, absolutely not.
And to our knowledge, there still is no supplemental report from that officer.
Right, because I think we're both kind of thinking like, well, maybe he was trying to like make
So
sure
how did
there was
all
enough
this
here to make a
come to light
report.
then? How did the police?
Their motives we don't know, but it just was one more thing on top of a number of other things that didn't smell right from our point of view.
Thank you very much.
I got that one I need.
Okay.
Unless there's anything else
Mr.
to say.
Stone,
that I
was
didn't-
this too a political hot potato?
Well, not it's not done near as some as I've had in the past, but
Or at least a high piece of toast?
it was a high piece of toast. It was. Now,
I don't
I tell
recommend
you,
defending your friend.
the
That's
very-
not a fun. That's nothing fun about
Yeah,
that.
it's not, especially a next door neighbor. I had a case up in Jacksonville one time where they were pursuing a lawyer, and they filed on him, and they found out the lawyer had formerly worked for the state attorney's office. So the governor sent me up there, and boy, the press was on this case every day. They follow me in my hotel room every night, not the room, but to the hotel. I'd sit down at the bar, have a beer, they'd come in, try to get stuff out of me. So it was a long story about the case, and so what I decided to do is I filed an op pros on it at Friday at 4:59, because I knew the press couldn't get it done until Monday, and headed back to Fort Pearson Bureau. Now if they're gonna call me, they gotta call me in my place, my business. No, I've had some political hot potatoes, Elliot. You might even
Yeah, I
been
know.
part of one of
Yeah,
them.
I know. Thanks for your time.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for doing this.